Hello, this is season 2, episode 7.
Sonia
Um,
Richards show. Wow,
yeah,
gosh.
we've come a long way actually,
Yeah.
thinking about it.
Well, thanks for that.
Season 2, episode 7, that's how many episodes in total? I'm not really.
I think that's 16 or 17.
That's a lot, that's a lot.
I think the stats is once you hit 20 and less than 95% of podcasts have
Mm,
more than 20 episodes.
okay.
I don't know. I just read that somewhere. I can't remember where I read it. Do not quote me.
But you know what? We're staying persistent and we're doing it every week, which is really
Exactly.
good.
Exactly.
So today, guys, we will be speaking about a trust horror story. Sounds
I know.
like really
Grim,
scary,
innit?
but it's not. It's not. Well,
Well, to be fair, it is a bit of a horror
yeah.
story. Yeah.
And we're just going to be speaking about how to really avoid these mistakes. We're going to be kind of covering entry charges and exit charges. In relation to that as well.
You know, everyone's like, what's an exit charge? What's an entry charge?
Yeah.
That's why we're here. We'll show you. We'll talk to you about it.
Mm-hmm. So we might as well get off on that foot then, isn't it?
Yes, might as well get started. So before we do something a bit different today, do you want to share something what we're going to do?
You can do it.
Okay, fine. So I like to teach. I like to talk, even though I'm an introvert. And let's not go there. I'm going to share my screen because I'm sure there's lots of visual learners out there. I know this is a video. When you're watching this, it's going to be live. But for those on the replay and just in general, I like to make sure that every type of learning style is addressed as much as possible. So we're going to do something slightly different. Let's see how it works. We're going to try something new. Let's see how we get on. Okay, cool. So you should see a talk board, and I'm going to write and talk about exit charges, entrance charges, periodic charges, and then we're going to share this horror story and what to avoid. Because you might fit in this category. You never know. So let's go. So I'll start with what's a exit charge. You got to excuse my doctor's handwriting. Sonia, you can warn me if my handwriting is really off.
Yeah.
I'll be my best behavior. Okay, this is what I call best behavior. I'll start with an exit charge and we'll go backwards. So maybe a bit of prelude about trusts first. Some basic rules. So I like drawing triangles when I'm depicting a trust. A trust has 3 parties. One who creates a trust is known as a settlor. One who manages a trust is known as a trustee. One who enjoys the spoils, so to speak, as beneficial ownership is the beneficiary. I can spell beneficiary. And then we've got property in the trust itself, okay? And the trustee manages all of that on behalf of the beneficiary. And there's different types of trusts. We are talking today about the most powerful type of trust, which is a discretionary trust. All right. So an exit charge, there's some rules. And the main thing is all about tax. I know we don't like to about it, but it's important. And an exit charge is if you have, well, the maximum you can put in a trust, value-wise, is £325,000 every 7 years. Okay, and we call this, I'm going to be a little bit techie, a chargeable lifetime transfer. All right. Now, if that trust is shut down, i.e., trying to exit the trust, it's a technical calculation, but I'm going to keep it really, really simple. Potentially, it can attract, if the value of the trust exceeds 325,000, can attract a charge up to, which I write this down, can attract an exit charge up to 6%. All right, which is a type of inheritance tax, and the trustees are responsible to pay that. And we're talking about this because this is the stuff that people just don't really know. There are a lot of people out there who sell trusts but don't give the advice. We're not giving you advice on this training, on this live training. We're just informing you. Okay. So that's an exit charge. If the value of the trust exceeds 325,000, you're going to get up to 6% charge. Why is that relevant? Because if you're not aware of it, then you're going to get a knock on the door from Mr. HMRC or Mr. HMRC saying you need to cough up some cash, or the trustees will be saying, "Oh, we need to cough up some cash." If you've got lay trustees, you may not be aware of it, and then you get stung with a surprise later down the line. So it's important that you're aware of that. All right. So that's an exit charge. So I'm going to pick on Sonia. What we going to talk about next?
Entry and anniversary charges.
All right, so an entry charge. Oh, sorry, I went into doctor's handwriting. Let me go back. An entry charge is basically, as I said, a chargeable lifetime transfer. If you put, we would normally say cap it at the nil rate band, okay, which is 325,000 as we speak, unless something has changed in the law. And if you put more than that in a trust, okay, so if you exceed that value, neat handwriting, Rich. So let's say you put £500,000 in the trust, then the excess, okay, in this case, if you put 500,000, it'd be £175,000 excess, will attract a 20% inheritance tax charge, right? And the trustees, because the body of trustees are deemed as a separate entity for tax purposes, for lifetime trusts, discretionary trusts, then 20% on that 175,000, which is a big chunk of change, especially if you're not expecting it. So trusts need to be drafted properly to really, ideally, especially for lifetime asset protection trusts, certain maybe life insurance trusts. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but ideally, especially for asset protection trusts, lifetime discretionary trusts, we should really try and cap it at 325 to prevent this 20% tax, unless it's a deliberate plan. Because in some instances, we're doing inheritance tax planning, not for the main home, just for those who are trying to correct me, but in general, it might be good to pay the tax early rather than pay 40%. But that's another conversation for another day. But in general, most people don't want to fork out 20% within the up to 12-month time period to pay that off. So we don't want to do that. So it's important that they know what an entry charge is. Important that people know what an exit charge is. And so a trust by a practitioner, a drafter, anyone giving technical advice should understand that you don't want to exceed that nil rate band. If you make a chargeable lifetime transfer in excess of that in a 7-year period, bearing in mind we'll take into consideration what you gifted within the 7-year term, up to 7 years prior, basically, then it's going to be interesting. So we really got to make sure we keep records, and really got to make sure that this figure is kept within its limit, else it will cause a problem. And this is where the administration comes in, and why it's important to have professionals give you the advice, and even maybe to administrate your trust if you're thinking about getting a trust, because of these technical tax challenges that can cause a problem. Okay. And then we mentioned about anniversary charges. So let's talk about that. Sometimes called periodic charge. Oops, neat handwriting and correct spelling. And if it's wrong, just smile and nod. It's any spelling mistakes, just smile and nod. Yeah, that's it. Anniversary charge. Okay, so that takes place every 10 years. So from the date that the trust is created is literally, day 0 all the way to year 10. I'm not going to get too techie about it. It's measured in kind of quarters. And ultimately, we get every 10 years, the value of the trust is reassessed. So that's why we want to keep it at 325,000, because if you just put any amount in there, so for example, your house on day 0 is worth 325,000, and in year 10, well, let's say year 5, it's worth 500,000, but the trust value is still 325,000. The trust would only be revalued at year 10, which it could be worth 750. in year 10. That's why it's revalued. The HMRC need to get their money. And so the excess, anything over 325,000 at that year 10, and cycles, every 10-year cycle is revalued, can trigger, again, up to 6% on the excess. All right, another form of inheritance tax on the trust. So that's kind of the basics in terms of what you need to know. We would also, with the client, go through this in detail, because you have to know this to make a choice. Do you want to go ahead with a trust or not? Like, you're saving lots of money over a generation. In England, it's up to 125 years that your trust will last. England and Wales. So we've got to decide, like, do we want this or not? Because the upside is very positive, but some people might be put off by all of this, and it's too complicated and blah blah blah. You need to know up front, and if you're not getting the right advice up front, it's going to cause a lot of problems. So, shall we introduce the horror story?
Yeah, definitely.
So we had a client, and she came to me. I can take this off now, the picture. Stop sharing. And she came to me, and I said, look, let's review your will, let's review your trust. She had a trust taken out some years before. Now, the important number here is number 7, which I mentioned, the 7-year rule. And obviously mentioned number 10, the 10-year rule. And she was past 7 years, but not quite hit 10 years yet. And I noticed the drafting of this trust was very poor. Now, I'm not going to have a dig about solicitors, but it's important to understand that not every solicitor understands trusts. And they may draft it because they are regulated and allowed to do so, but they may not understand the technical side of what's going on. And you may be misadvised or not advised at all. So you need to find specialists who understands the technical side of trust to give you the advice. I would highly recommend you use the STEP website, the Society of Trusts and Estates Practitioners, who, people train very, very hard, minimum of 2 years, sometimes even longer, to get qualified, to talk about the technical aspects of trust, to give you the confidence and the advice that you need. And there are some very competent solicitors, competent professionals, legal or lawyers. I'm a lawyer, I'm not a solicitor, who could give you the technical advice you need to make an informed choice. Just because they have the word solicitor on the label does not mean that they're necessarily competent to talk about trust. And I'm not having to dig at solicitors or legal professionals, but you need to make an informed choice and know that the person that you're dealing with, don't just take it for granted, because you're a lawyer, you must know what you're talking about. That's not always the case. And there's a perception out there that can be misconstrued. So very important that you speak to the right type of people to get the right advice. And the trust that I read was drafted by a solicitor who was actually shut down because the client wanted to go back to deal with them, and they could not be traced at all. So it just goes to show, all right? So what happened was, I noticed that the drafting was pretty poor. So number 1, there was only 1 trustee. There should be a minimum of 2 trustees in a lifetime asset protection trust. There's only 1. And the drafting of the trust was such that it put £325,000 in, but it didn't cap it. So it would never, ever go above that amount. And I'm like, something's wrong here. And I explained to the client, well, if you have this year 10 and your house is now at the time was worth £500,000, and we talked about that anniversary charges, the value of the property is reassessed every 10 years. So even though the actual value of her house at the time was £500,000, at the time of drafting, it was 325,000 or under. So therefore, she weren't in trouble at that point, but at year 10, it would be a conversation. So I explained the concept of the exit charge. We explained the concept of the entry charge. We explained the concept of anniversary. And I said, well, if you had come to me a lot later, I think maybe a couple of years later, you would have had up to 6% on this lovely home of yours to fork out. And she goes, no one explained this to me. And she had some notes attached to to the trust, nothing about anniversary charges, nothing about exit charges, nothing about entrance charges. And I explained about exit charges. So we were able, and this it was a potential horror story because she thought her house was ring fenced. The trust wasn't really done correctly. Now there's something called, I'm going to get too technical, right? Resulting trusts and I forgot the other term now, constructive trust. So the court wouldn't allow the trust to fail. Equity would not allow the trust to fail, but it would just cause another headache that she just didn't need. And so I explained you must have a minimum of 2 trustees. There's nothing on land registry to recognise the fact that the trust even exists. And also you got a potential, I think it worked like 35k tax bill if you had come to me a lot later, which she was not best pleased about at all. So we had to then sort the problem out. And the main thing is, did she have the trust for more than 7 years? Remember I talked about the chargeable lifetime transfer in the beginning. Should I bring it back up again, do you think? Or just keep talking? Bring it back up?
Yeah, you can bring it up.
Just, I'm sure people might want to just find out, what is he talking about?
Chargeable, because they might not be too familiar.
All right, so talk about 7-year rule. So it's really important that we understand this. There we go. So we have her trust. She's got a house as property. House. Sorry, neat handwriting. The trust was okay, to make a chargeable lifetime transfer or a gift into trust. So it's called a chargeable lifetime transfer. You only can go really to avoid tax. You got to do this every 7 years. The clock resets every 7 years. So the first question was, how long has this trust been in play? Because if it was less than 7 years, we couldn't shut the trust down. Well, we could, but she couldn't create a new trust. And the whole point of she wanted to have peace of mind that her house was in trust. So we had to make sure that the house is at least 7 years in excess. So that was the first thing. So we're looking at here, we addressed entrance charge. So 325,000 was fine. That was okay. We looked at, okay, so is it more than 7 years? Are we going to trigger some kind of a problem to shut it down and create? If we shut it down and create a brand new trust immediately within a 7-year period, then we would add another £325,000 on top of the one that she's already got. And so we'd have this kind of 14-year shadow, we call it. And then again, and then the entrance charge, she'd have an entrance charge on this new 325. Or actually, we have to work out the total amount. And she'll be suing me for poor advice. So we can't create a brand new trust within a 7-year period. So that's number one. Has she exceeded 7 years? All right. Thankfully, that was the case. Number two, has she exceeded 10 years? Well, thank God she had not. Because had she exceeded 10 years, she'd have to pay an anniversary charge. So she didn't exceed 10 years. So our point is, we need to shut this trust down without her attracting an exit charge. So the value of the trust, because it hasn't reached 10 years yet, was still 325,000. And if as long as the trust is 325 or less, there's no exit charge. So we were able to make an appointment to take the property out of the trust, make an appointment for the trustees to shut the trust down. In fact, the first thing was to add a trustee. So there's 2 trustees because the trustee can't make a decision by themselves. So the appointment was to add a trustee first, have a meeting. So you're the second trustee. Do you think we should shut this trust down? Yeah, I think we should trust. I think we should shut the trust down. So we're now in agreement as 2 trustees, because if one trustee said yes and one trustee said no, nothing can happen. So now both of us as trustees can agree.
Yeah.
So then we make minutes of our meeting. That's now agreed, and then we formally make an appointment to shut the trust down.
Mhm.
So then that's done and appointments made. And then we've got to create a new trust. And so a new trust is created with a minimum of 2 trustees.
And that,
you have to be a trustee.
yeah, and
I have to be a
that will
trustee.
last another 7 years before they can do another one.
Well, in her case, it will last until she passes away.
Okay.
But
if she just wanted to put more,
it will never go beyond 325,000.
But if she wanted to, okay.
Yeah. So, not to give too much away, we draft the trust in such a way that the whole property is ring fenced. But from a discretionary trust point of view, or the relevant property trust regime, she will not get penalised for a chargeable lifetime transfer being in excess of 329,000.
Okay.
So, so that's basically how we would make sure the trust is drafted. So that way, it's protected. She's ring fenced. If she wants to move house, she can move house. The trust will just keep the money, buy a new house, all that stuff. She's got complete peace of mind. The trustees will just say, "Oh, you want to sell your house? Yeah, I want to sell my house. Great, let's agree to sell your house." That's why it's important to have the owner of the house to be a trustee, so you're in control. Unless age is a problem, where we think maybe mental capacity, etc., that might not be a good idea. But ultimately, we want the owner of the house to be the trustee of the house. So yeah, that really was the long and short of that. But it could have been a complete horror. And maybe you're listening to this now and thinking, "My days, I've not been explained this at all. Let me have my trust checked over. How many cycles of 10 years have I gone without even knowing?" There's people in that situation. So very, very, very important. You didn't ask a question of them. I don't think
I think you covered it. It's fine, yeah.
Okay. And so that really is we wanted to highlight that to make sure you understand the gravity of getting advice first. And that's why we do not, quote unquote, sell any product except for a consultation.
Yeah, in fact, the wealth risk assessment.
Don't care. If you come to us saying I want to trust, great, consultation first. You got to get the advice. You got to make sure you know what's going on, and you can challenge us or challenge whoever your advisors are, especially after watching this, to make sure that your needs, your advice and needs are met properly, and that you're well informed as a client, to even challenge your advisors nicely, to make sure you're getting the right advice, so that you're confident what's going on is correct. That's the main thing. There's a lot of noise out there on the internet doing research, and I'm not doing this to put anyone on the spot, but I'm doing this we're doing this to educate the masses, so that it's not just a tool that for the super rich and wealthy. It's for those who want to create generational wealth for their loved ones and family members. And this is one way of definitely how to go about doing that. But you need to know the rules of the game, else you're not going to win ultimately. And the other thing, well, now I won't go into it. We'll talk about it another time. I think I've a lot of technical stuff we've covered.
What did you want to touch on?
Well, I was talking about like gift with reservation of benefit, and I think maybe we're going to go off on another topic. So
we can do.
A lot of people like property. How can we use trust if you've got residential property, investment properties, which is fine, but that 325,000 is that magic number, can also be problematic as well as wonderful. And that 7-year wait, how many 7-year cycles can we wait before your challenge can be eradicated or mitigated? And so people come to us when they think the later years of life, oh, I should be thinking about this now when you're in your 70s. I'm like,
no, you should have been thinking about that.
Exactly. Life expectancy, statistically speaking, that's 2 trusts, that's 2 cycles of 325, and you're sitting on a £5 million estate. That's not going to cut it. So go take more drastic measures, which normally means more money, which means the client's not really happy, even though we can save you a ton more money. So that's why it's just getting advice early, educated early, is so important. But yeah, we can touch on property and stuff maybe another session, I think.
Yeah, we can do that another session. But thank you. That was very insightful.
No, thank you. Thank you. I think, case studies are important.
Very important, because it kind of helps you imagine it and put it into perspective.
Absolutely.
And also, the drawing really helps as well. So
Yeah,
and I'm sure they'd be really appreciative.
I hope so. Comments and feedback always welcome.
Yeah.
It's a different style. Let's hear what you got to say about that. And thank you as always for
No worries.
for your questions and support and everything else. Let us know your thoughts. Did you know about this? Was it a surprise? Is it something you would like to know more about? Is it too technical? You'd rather just keep it simple? Let us know. Feedback in the comments below will be really, really useful for us. Thank you. We still have an ebook that we launched just a couple of weeks back. But we can certainly help you. Not a problem at all.
Just be quick and grab the ebook before
yes
it goes up.
So brilliant. I feel like I'm waffling a little bit now.
Well, maybe
let's wrap up.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.